Oh, here we are.
Yeah, it's I'm Quacking Duck, and it's so great to be here.
We are live, aren't we?
Yes, and I am the father of Quacking Duck,
I'm so
also known as
excited.
Sleepy Reader or Damian.
As you can see, we have a very, very special guest who's going to chime in with her 2 cents on the First Kingdom.
Do you want to show them the cover?
The First Kingdom.
Sorry, now
This
that's
is
me.
the cover of the trade. The cover of the trade. You're
Let me
losing us.
Pause all this. 1 sec there.
You're losing
Are
us?
we-
My fault. I'm just going to close that. Close all tabs.
I didn't hear anything.
There we go. I was hearing it. Sorry about that. My issue there.
Yeah. So Quacking Duck and I have been reading the trade or the hardback.
Yes,
it's hardback. Is it still a trade? But anyway, the collection.
Yeah.
Well, shall I give a little introduction for those people who haven't heard of First Kingdom before?
Yeah, for sure.
Do
Go
you want
for
to
it.
do that?
If there's no, you go ahead and what I'd like to know too from
Very
that.
good introduction.
I would like to
So,
hear if there's an introduction in the book too, just to see what they say, if they tell you any extra information about when it was published, if there's anything like that in that hardcover.
It's kind of bogus kind of stuff,
Okay.
you know, kind of BS, really.
Yeah.
What's
What's BS? It's kind of cow manure. It's it means stuff where people are just kind of saying a lot of nonsense that doesn't really tell you anything important.
Otherwise known as phony baloney.
Phony baloney, that's another stuff.
Phony
Yeah.
baloney.
Yada yada yada.
Yada yada blah.
So you know, like there's an introduction here by Roy Thomas who says how driven Jack
Of
was.
course it was
And you know, talking about how he was ahead of his time and that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. So basically the same kind of things that were in the single
These are
issue.
the
Right.
volumes.
Yeah.
The Growth of Tundran, The Galaxy Hunters, Vengeance, Migration, The Space Explorers Club, Destiny.
Those are the titles of the 6 First Kingdom volumes, although the first 4 are the original First Kingdom, and then the last 2 volumes are other stories he did, which he decided were connected to First Kingdom, but I don't know if they were when he published them originally or not.
I see. So stuff published in other places.
Right. Some further graphic novels he did.
Okay.
So for people, we're kind of jumbled up here, but for people who don't know, the First Kingdom was a independently published comic back, when was it starting? 74?
I think it was 74. Yeah.
Starting in 74, and it was a hugely ambitious 24-volume graphic novel, which he did finish. Back then in 1974, I probably got a copy in 75 or 76.
Oh, really? Yeah.
You had to mail order it, basically. Except, you know, very few people lived by a comic book store back then.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure I got it through the mail. Maybe directly from Bud Plant, who was the publisher, or
That's right. Yeah.
I'm not sure where I got it.
Yeah.
So-
Took it over. Yeah.
I had 2 or 3 issues, and I'm pretty sure I had the first issue, but I'm not sure if I had consecutive issues or not.
Yeah.
And,
did you look through them or read them at the time? Do you remember? Or?
I did read them at the time.
You know
Okay.
what? I have one last thing to say.
Yes.
Of course.
The first day school.
This is a song she made up.
It's first day school. New school, new year, new day. Hey, that's not my
do a
thing.
music video another
We can do
time.
a music video another time. This is
Okay.
just that goodbye. Quacking Duck is leaving.
Quacking Duck out.
And
Thanks for joining us.
Thank goodness you didn't drop the mic.
Right. I'm holding on to it tightly.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks for indulging us.
No, of course. It's no problem. No, it's great to hear what you had to say there.
But yeah, as I was saying off air to Terrence, my daughter was very curious as to what I was reading, so she made me tell her the story at bedtime last night. And she can't get over how crazy it is.
Yeah, that was the first thing she said. It is crazy.
So, so we were saying, Jack, so some people call this the first graphic novel, but clearly there's no clear demarcation of where the first graphic novel is. If you start looking it up, there's all kinds of claims to first graphic novels.
Yeah.
And I think that, for instance, where did it go? Gil Kane was doing these odd graphic novel kind of things starting in the 60s.
Uh-huh.
This one is my Marvel reproduction of Black Mark, which originally was like in a paperback book.
Oh, really?
And they kind of repasted it together. And much like, I don't know, this particular one may have come after First Kingdom, but I know he did some before that.
Yeah.
Much like First Kingdom, there's a lot of just text typed in.
Yeah, and you made a good point. I think, I don't know how we were talking, like through messages, I think, comments about, you know, the use of that text to make it seem more kind of novel-like or something more literary, as opposed to, you know, a comic book with some handwriting, which is a good point, and it makes sense to some degree.
I think there was still the aspect of comic book writers a little embarrassed by the way comic books worked, and they wanted to elevate it by making it more like novels.
Yeah.
And they mention, I think, maybe in your introduction too, how he was very into Prince Valiant and Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
And if you look at Prince Valiant, there are no balloons and bubbles in that. I happen to have my volume of Prince Valiant here.
That's right.
It's
same kind of thing.
All text, and many panels for each Sunday, and each one signed by Hal Foster.
Uh-huh.
Did you notice how each page is signed by Katz as if it is a Sunday paper?
And which makes sense because, I mean, I think that's partially a world that he came from too. He was working with some of those guys. I mean, in the myriad of jobs that he had within the comics industry or whatever. Yeah.
And to the early comic book people, Hal Foster and Alex Raymond were the class acts that they wished they could be too. They were stuck. They were stuck in the world of comic books when they wanted to be on the Sunday comics page.
Mm-hmm.
And then this combines like a crazy underground approach with that Prince Valiant approach. It's sort of one of my takeaways from this. Were you trying to look at something?
Just kind of looking at every time you hold it up, because I mean it does look cleaner than.
Yeah, well, it's on much more expensive paper for one thing. I don't know if they actually cleaned it up or if just printing it on different paper changes it.
Mm-hmm.
And like you pointed out before, they changed the font.
Yeah.
In yours, it looks like done by a typewriter, basically.
Completely. Yeah. I don't know if the computer will pick it up too much, but it's just like a cut and paste right from a computer. Let's see how well you can see this on the on this there. The image is probably really grainy. I don't know how well that's coming up.
It's kind of grainy, but you can see that it's that. And I'm pretty sure this is a computer font that's made to look like hand lettering. It's extremely consistent. Okay. And as I also mentioned to you off air, there was one place where I found they'd accidentally cut and paste the same piece of text in 3 different places.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So it was a bit of a typographical error, I guess.
Poor quality control there.
Yeah. Well, when you consider how much there is in here, there must, editorially speaking, there must be a lot to proofread and try to keep track of. Yeah. So I think, but I'm kind of making us jump ahead of ourselves, right? Do you want to hold up some covers of the original magazine?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the first couple I've kind of shown. I'll just show 3, 4, and 5. And I mean, it's one thing, especially as it goes on. There's a little sample. This is book number 3. Especially as it goes on. I mean, the covers are just so impressive. They're really, really amazing. Even, I mean, obviously all the art is really great, but just the way that he kind of just lays out these really epic looking poses and very kind of painterly, and they're all kind of I don't know, just the way everybody's positioned on the page is similar across the books. This is book 5, which I just finished, and this is my favorite cover, I think, out of all of them. The color use is really nice in here too. So
it really bothers me that they don't reproduce the covers at all in the trades.
Yeah, that's a very strange thing.
They are really impressive covers, I guess.
They really are. Those early ones are. As it kind of gets a little further, they get a little questionable. And then this is number 7, book 7, which I haven't dug into yet. I'm missing book 6. But now that I'm kind of gaining momentum on reading these, I might kind of have a peek through the other ones that I have.
Yeah.
Read a little more.
So
yeah, go on.
Well, you've said in your other video, but for people who haven't seen it, he was a professional comic book artist, and I guess he had worked as an assistant for Hal Foster at some point.
I believe so, and then people like Simon and Kirby as well. He was helping them out, and yeah.
And then I think at the time that he moved to California and lived in San Francisco, he was working for something called Skywald, which was kind of an obscure. I think they did things kind of similar to Warren magazine, if I remember correctly, and he may have worked at Warren a little bit too. Warren being eerie and creepy.
That's right. It seems that he jumped all over the place, and I think I think it was said in 1969 is when he kind of moved to San Francisco and discovered that whole world.
Yeah, so he discovered the world of the underground hippie comics, and that inspired him to go off and do his own thing. So obviously they were indie publishers before people like he was. Yeah. And in the introduction to the second volume, there's an introduction by Richard Penny of ElfQuest.
Okay, yeah.
And he says at the time there were 2 ground level comics, which was this and Star Reach. So they had underground comics and they had ground level. And I think what ground level was ones done by, like, if you look at Star Reach, they were done by professional comic book artists, but they were doing their own thing, probably inspired by the underground cartoonists, but just not as extreme and more professional.
Yeah, more kind of creating their own characters and worlds, and but nothing that was purely just drug use and sex. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And those, like Star Reach, I think even more so than First Kingdom, could have been more successful if there had been more comic book shops to sell them in at the time.
Yeah.
So all of these books probably would have done better 5 or 10 years later when the comic book shops became more common. So
just to kind of quickly put this question in there, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately too, how much I kind of had a turning point with issue 5, as we'll talk about a bit later, but how much has all this kind of history and its place in kind of the comics history, when you were reading it, how much of that was at the forefront of your brain as far as like looking at these books as more of a historical interest, as opposed to like, could you break through that and kind of read the story? I had a bit of trouble. I say it because I had a bit of trouble with that at first, getting that idea of like this history behind it.
I think the history helps me get through it.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I mean, I think without feeling it was an important historical thing, I might give it less of a chance than I have. I mean, I will get into it more, but I feel it has a lot of charms and a lot of negatives to it also. And as a kid, though, I mean, I know somehow, through whatever. Did I freeze up?
You did a little bit, but I'm with you. I caught you.
I perceived it as you freezing, and then I realized it's probably me because my internet's gotten so bad. As a kid, somehow I knew it was important. They must have talked about it in the fanzines that I ordered it through, as reverential tones. So as a kid, I remember reading. I mean,
I'm sure at the time it probably stood out quite substantially too. That's my thought on it. That it probably jumped out at you when you saw it.
Right. The few grown-ups who were reading comics at the time were excited to have something that, brought out the potential of the genre or the medium more than most comics being published at the time. So, and well, even like you read some of the stuff from the introductions of the comics themselves, and even them, they kind of pump up how important it is and stuff.
Totally.
So
And how,
kind of a
and
hype
it's something that
machine,
you were saying,
but-
how driven he was is what a lot of the guys
Right.
just said. Like, I'm sitting and watching him, and this is a man who has a vision, and he really
Right.
needs, like, really emphatically, you know, yeah.
Yeah, so everyone wanted this to be really important at the time, I think, and to
Yeah.
the people on the inside world of comics, whatever small world that was at the time. So I read it as a kid, just assuming this, whatever I understood or didn't understand of it, it was important, and
Mhm.
so I felt grown up reading it. Of course, it was full of naked people too, which
Yeah,
also gives one confused feelings at that age. But
yeah.
yeah, I wonder
So-
how the people from the underground comics felt about it, but I haven't seen
Uh-huh.
anything about that.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting side, actually, that I don't really know in kind of the little bit of research I've been doing. It's all kind of bigger names that keep talking about how important
Right.
it is. I wonder how he was perceived, or how people approached him in that kind of world, you know, or how he kind of meshed in with that world. It must have been an interesting time as far as, like you're saying, this ground level comics, their place in it. I mean, because there was really a place for mainstream comics, and there really was a place for the undergrounds. These guys really were mining new territory, regardless of the fact of who was first and who was second and whatever. I mean,
Right.
that all comes under definition of a graphic novel or whatever, but all of them had the thing in common of, like, it was just new territory as far as getting maybe sci-fi stories out there, and just
Right.
or fantasy or whatever, creating their own worlds from scratch, you know, which obviously he did in just this enormous way. So
Right. And what I imagine impressed all the people back then, like, you know, Howard Chaykin or whoever who was doing a little bit of stuff in Star Reach,
yeah,
was that he committed his life to this. You know, he
Yeah.
didn't say, "Oh, I'll do a few side projects that are more radical and still
Mhm.
do Superman or whatever."
hmm
He just went. He devoted his life to this, and I think his wife supported him or something, but maybe not.
it seems to be that she did at the time, yeah. But I mean, didn't it take him? Wasn't the last one done in? I think I read somewhere that it was 86. That it took him kind of 10 to 12 years to complete.
Yeah,
the
12
whole,
years. That
Yeah.
would make sense because 2 a year and there's 24.
Yeah, I think I think he stuck to that 2 a year every single time.
Right.
I don't know if he wavered on that at all.
Yeah. And for people who haven't read it, you know, 2 comics a year, writing and drawing doesn't sound that big of a deal. I mean, but if you actually read it, and you can see that each page would take a week to draw, because each panel is, or many of the panels are like a whole world unto themselves, you know, with tiny creatures running around in the backgrounds, and, you know, just intensely inked
Yeah.
little panels.
Well, and I think that was the second thing that Quacking Duck said, was just that how many panels are on a page and how intense. I mean, when you look at kind of a full page that he rarely does in the early ones, and
Right.
then you think he's doing those full pages about 10 times on each page in a small
Right.
format, is pretty mind-blowing. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, each one has the amount of detail you would expect in a splash page.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the page I'm looking at here must have 16 panels.
Yeah. Well, and then all the depth as well too is impressive, because it's not just that there's a lot of characters in the frame. You're seeing stuff behind, and you're seeing the trees, and you're seeing buildings in the far background, and you're seeing mountain and landscape, and you're seeing everything. It's
Right.
just, it's that kind of mentality that's really fascinating too, that we talked about it before too, this kind of outsider art. It's just this, they're driven, they have to do this.
Right.
There's no way around it. I have to get this stuff out of my head and just do it, you know?
Did you ever see that documentary on Robert Crumb?
I did.
And Crumb can't stop drawing, but his crazier brother, even more so, had this graphomania where he just couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is a slightly more controlled version of that
Yeah.
kind of graphomania. He had to fill every corner of every panel and just
Yeah, that's right.
keep putting, you know, why put all these tiny little fairy creatures everywhere leading their own life? I mean, it's really cool, but
It really is.
The
Well, and that's the other
expenditure
thing.
of time.
I mean, you look at these little creatures in it, and they're not just kind of like standing there. Sometimes they're like dancing around, they're moving.
Right.
You can see movement and facial expressions and
Yeah.
everything, and
They're having
almost
conversations. They're
almost like
falling
an
in love.
Aragones kind of Mad magazine where he was doing everything in the panels or in the borders rather. It's
Right.
just one panel is all these kind of little details that have their own life.
Yeah.
So did you want to talk a little bit about the actual issues? Like, I mean, because I've kind of talked about the first couple myself in the videos. It would be good to hear your thoughts on the first, say, 2 or 3, just how you got into it and how you found reading it.
Yeah, you did a pretty extensive video on the first 2. And it starts with nuclear war. I guess the nuclear war happens and the world gets turned to cavemen halfway through the first page.
Mm-hmm.
About 5 panels in or something. But but that really threw me, because later it's a world full of gods and millennia seem to have passed. I thought just like 100 years had passed or something.
Yeah.
From the nuclear war to the present.
Yeah.
And so through those 2 issues that you've already discussed, I was struggling with, wait a minute, what's going on here? And I don't know which issue it happened in, but there's this little man who's kind of deformed, who becomes his friend, and who eventually tells him the story of the gods and Adium. Was that in the first 2 issues, or was that later?
I think that was like number
the 3rd issue, maybe.
I think somewhere around there. It was in the first few, though. Yeah.
So then we're introduced to this complex theology of the gods and the uber god above them, who's now just like a tree stump or something.
Yeah.
Who created them all. And that could be a myth, right? And later we see a more or hints at a more science fictional explanation of all of this.
Yeah.
But it's told to Darkenmore, the hero, by this little man who later turns out to have been an astronaut.
That's right. Yeah.
And that just played with my mind. Like, why is he telling Darkenmore a complete lie, if it is a complete lie? I mean, there's lots of things like that. But did you find that where it's kind of like, this is like, the background of the story is like quicksand. There's no firmament or something.
No, absolutely. And I think that for me was a good turning point in issue 5 too. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but that idea kind of even twists even further when you get into issue 5 and they go a little more into the history of these creatures who are now these mutations. And that's kind of something that I really like, because you kind of have this ground of, okay, well, you have, or at least I did as I was reading it, these ideas of, okay, this is very biblical, this is very epic, this is what this is going to be, this is what this is going to be. At this stage, now that I'm at, it's really made a turning point as far as I feel more drawn in because of all these kind of additional, you have this kind of basis to work off of. And now he's taking that one step further with like, okay, well, now those people that were these astronauts, they have these androids on the spaceships as well, who might have had something to do with the creation of these gods and da-da-da. And it just seems to be hinting at so much more, which I think it kind of works for me as far as that layers and the quicksand and stuff.
Did I freeze up again?
You did a little, but you're okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess for me, it was troubling. I wanted to believe one thing, and I had trouble shifting.
Yeah,
but maybe if it all makes sense at the end of the 24 issues, that I'll believe it more, that I'll be fine with it all in retrospect.
Yeah.
I feel torn as to whether this is a person in control of his story or just changing his mind and forgetting what he wrote earlier or things like that.
I hear that. I have in the back of my mind the hope that, you know, he does have these ideas. I mean, there is for sure some inconsistencies. I really like the idea of playing with I'm kind of losing my grounding as far as I like the idea of just playing with the God element. I'm really enjoying that side of it. It's just working well for me. The way that all that is shifting, I enjoy those shifts. I think we have Little Monster Movie Podcast is watching as well.
Hello.
Someone that's unfamiliar to me. So hello and thank you for tuning into our First Kingdom.
So it tells you who's watching now?
Yeah, I have that little chat. Oh, I have the little chat because he said, "Hey guys," and he loves the BBC show. I don't know what that's in reference to. Maybe there's a. Oh, is that Lars von Trier The Kingdom? I think he might be thinking of the show The Kingdom from Lars von Trier. So just to get back to, did you have a turning point early on? Because I found the first issue especially was really, it felt like a slog as far as I'm just wading through all this information.
Yeah, you know what? Where it became interesting to me is when we got more of the gods.
Yeah.
It seemed like kind of all the Dark and More stuff seemed like a foregone conclusion. Right.
Yeah.
He's going to struggle. He's going to fall in love. He's going to have a baby. They're going to start a new civilization. And then we're told from very early on that he's not going to live to see his baby be born and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's really no room to go with that. You know what's going to happen. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it felt like the God characters were more interesting and unpredictable. Mm-hmm. Although then after a while, as Quacking Duck mentioned, the God part gets repetitious where they're being punished and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Although all of that was really cool, the vision of the underworld and everything was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, very impressive.
So I think I constantly go up and down. Like there'd be points where it just feels like a slog, and then I'd be really into it for a while. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I thought of is, on one hand, this is kind of a slog, but on the other hand, if I stop reading it and try to pick it up 6 months from now, I'll have forgotten too much. I feel like I need to keep going.
Yeah, it really feels like once you've got the momentum, you've got to keep going on it. Yeah.
But each individual issue really does take as long as a modern day graphic novel to read. Mm-hmm. So it's literally like going to be like reading 24 volumes of a graphic novel. Yeah.
Well, and even within the single issues too, the numbering on the pages continues from issue to issue. So I mean, in issue 5, I'm looking at page 136. So again, it's this reminder every once in a while. It's like, holy crap.
Oh, that's interesting because in my version there is no numbers.
There's no numbers in yours. Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's kind of weird. You know, it would make sense to put numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of excited to read more and kind of exhausted at the same time.
Yeah.
And
I think
go ahead.
Once I finished issue 4, I kind of took a break for a couple of days. I just read issue 5 tonight. And I think that even 2-day break just helped to kind of, not overwhelm myself. But so I guess the other thing to say, I suppose, is just kind of as it goes, you just get more. Once you kind of pass the Dark and More's death, it opens up a little more for me. As I was saying, the 5th one really, I don't know, that one worked for me. That's been my favorite issue so far. I like the idea of these priests now who have separated from these kind of tribes to go in and protect Tundrin. Kind of protect him and train him to kind of take the throne again. I felt was pretty great. Almost
that part was fun,
Star Warsy.
But at the end of this issue, the priests leave him alone. He's a big 8-year-old now.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're just leaving him alone, and they're not. What really killed me is they're not even telling him that he's the son of the king.
Yeah.
They're just expecting him to eventually go reclaim his kingdom. Just
because of their belief in the gods, it's all been preordained. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a certain, I think maybe because we discussed on Twitter or wherever it was and in comments about how this has the kind of outsider art monomaniacalness to it.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of had my radar out for all the bits that seemed a little crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing that becomes exhausting reading 5 volumes, 5 issues in a row, is how so many of the characters look alike.
Yes. Yeah.
And comic book artists did, particularly back then, draw people looking alike, but it seems more extreme here, maybe because it's in black and white.
Yeah.
Maybe because no one wears clothes.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're reading a superhero comic book, Captain America looks different than Nick Fury because of a few things.
Major details. Yeah, yeah. With this, it's literally like a headpiece that they're wearing, or an article of the small amount of clothing that they're wearing. Like a, you know, yeah, it's especially with the gods, because they have that kind of alien look to them.
Right.
It's really hard sometimes to who the heck, and then the names on top of that, I find really hard to follow as well. I'm constantly looking back at names like, okay, so that's that guy from that, and you know.
Varan, the guy who usurps him, is that Varan?
That's right. Yeah, Vargon or Vargor.
At one
yeah,
point,
like
he
that,
apparently cut his hair.
Yeah.
And then I was like, there would be 3 people in the panel with short hair, and I'm like, which one is Varan?
Yeah, which is the guy I'm supposed to be learning about. Yeah, yeah.
You used to know it was Varan because he was shorter than Darkenmore, because he was younger.
Yeah.
And the body types are identical for the most part. Even, you know, the children are just the same body type but smaller. And
yes, which is very very strange to me. It's really odd.
Yeah, the children look odd, and he does very detailed nipples on the women, and they're all identical.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be noticing that, but I did. Pardon me.
It's a book of detailed nipples. That should be on the back of the next volume.
But it's all one nipple drawn over and over again on every single woman in
yeah.
And they all have
just picturing this guy at his drawing board. Yeah. More nipples. Yeah, yeah.
They all have the same physical, you know, sort of very thin, 0 body fat.
Yes.
Physical types.
Which makes sort of sense in that world for sure.
It does. It does make sense in that world, but it just makes every single woman look the same. Yeah.
And then match that with all the guys with long hair as well too. Yeah.
Right. With the guys, there's some who are bald and some who have beards, but other than that, they all look the same too. But
yeah,
there's a little more to distinguish the men from the women. Like, it's hard to tell what was that goddess's name who was in love with him. Her and her mother looked almost identical.
Yeah, yeah. I'm blanking on her name completely.
Right. Yeah, there's just too many names.
There really is. There's so many characters. And that's something that also that I'm looking, you know, the vastness of where this story is supposedly going, like going through generations, is I think an interesting angle too that I'm curious to follow through to see exactly how that progression happens and what that's going to encompass. Because I think that one of the things that I also had read somewhere that the kind of a factor that runs through the whole series is that no matter what happens with their history, they seem to be kind of doing the same thing. These humanoid type characters, they never really call them humans, at least not yet. It's humanoid a lot. I haven't really heard the term humans.
So that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, they talk about, eventually, I guess maybe in issue 4 or 5, they talk about this endless cycle.
Yeah.
Which again is what kind of screws with my mind, fucks with my mind.
Yeah.
When we had the beginning of the nuclear holocaust. Mm-hmm. But maybe there's been many nuclear holocausts. Maybe these gods are ruling over us right now, and we're going to have a nuclear holocaust and return to this. I'm not sure what he's thinking there.
Yeah, and that's a territory I hope that he does go, which I hope he has this foresight, because it seems to almost be hinting at that with the more we know about these astronauts and everything, that idea of maybe this group going around and experimenting. Because I mean, even the gods in the 5th issue, there's that one brother who's kind of, he just sits in and thinks all day. He just sits and ponders everything. he goes to the one god that was banished to Earth and kind of gives him what for, like, hey, at any time I can turn and I can really take you out of this whole equation, but I'm not going to. We have to let, there's this all talk about we have to let the experiment keep going. Right. And they use that word once or twice when they go, or one of the gods goes to, I guess, their version of hell for the gods and talks to the big throned demon there who's Zagron or Zaz, something like that. But
right. And
that
apparently
idea
convinces him not to send man back to the Stone Age yet again.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, this idea that they have this power to do these things they don't want to. That idea of like looking in a petri dish and seeing what's going on is kind of come up a little bit more in this 5th issue. That I hope that's a territory that the stories end up going towards. That seems kind of interesting to me. That seems like it would break the mold a little bit, as far as, because it can get kind of samey and, oh, I've read this kind of story before, or that kind of Shakespearean epic doesn't do it for me necessarily. But those ideas I find fascinating if he explores them.
Yeah, but see, that's one of the areas I'm confused, because and this, I guess, is spoilers for anyone who is concerned. We are learning in issue 4 and 5 that these gods, these trans gods, as they're sometimes called, maybe have been sort of transformed robots who used to serve the astronauts. Yeah. And so it may just have happened a few hundred years ago. So they may believe that they're part of all these cycles, but are they really? Or did they get turned into gods? It's hard to know how much time passed from when the astronauts came to Earth. I thought they came to Earth during the most recent nuclear holocaust to try to stop it. Something went wrong, shrunk the astronauts down and turned them into little mutant fairies.
Yes,
and
that's right.
Robots to oversized gods.
Shrunk the humans through the gods. Yeah.
All kind of hard to for me to accept. I guess I'm too much of a science fiction person, maybe.
I see. I hear you. Yeah, and I mean, I'm kind of more. I'm willing to accept some of that. I mean, but I hear you. It is a little odd at times, for sure. Yeah, which is, I guess, maybe my hope is. I feel like as I'm reading this, I'm really giving him the benefit of the doubt of like, hey, if this guy has decided he wants to dedicate 12 years, I'm sure he's got an idea. I mean, that may very well, like you said, he may very well be making it up as he goes along and have no idea where he's going with it. Some of that automatic kind of writing idea or whatever.
Right.
But,
or he may have got the ideas while tripping on acid, and they may not have been as good ideas as he thought.
That's right. Yeah.
It just struck me, though, there's, that this is almost like the Iliad and the Odyssey meet Philip K. Dick, if it keeps going in this direction, where you don't know what is real, because it's sort of implied that everything the gods or trans gods believe is actually an illusion.
Okay, yeah.
And the guy who spends all his time thinking keeps talking about how they're really just following a program and stuff. And that just seems very Philip K. Dick to me. Do you discover that you're really just a program, or that you're really an illusion of yourself? Yeah. But it could go from this point. It could go in any one of these 3 or 4 different directions, really.
Yeah.
So
and I mean, you're more of a sci-fi background than me, so how does this idea of, because it really is some of those elements, like you said, it really is sci-fi mixed with fantasy, mixed with maybe some more comic booky type of elements. Have you seen anything does this remind you of anything else? Like, is there anything that you can think of that you've seen before, or does this seem like he was kind of treading new territory even in those kind of ways?
I can see the elements that are combined here, but I don't feel like I've ever seen them combined this way.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the Cavemen Adventures is very much like a lot of Edgar Rice Burroughs books. Yeah. Which, if you know the history of science fiction, he was like the most popular writer in America at one point. Yeah. Probably when Jack Katz was growing up. You know who Edgar Rice Burroughs is?
Yeah, I know the name, yeah.
I tend to assume most people do, but because he had a big revival when I was a teenager, but that would have been 10 years before you were.
Yeah.
Well, he created Tarzan, but he also did John Carter of Mars.
That's right. Yeah.
And the Pellucidar novels about at the Earth's core, where there's all these dinosaurs and people in loincloths running around at the Earth's core,
Okay.
fighting intelligent pterodactyls and stuff. And so anyway, he wrote all of these things where people were always reduced to the primitive stage and then had one torrid adventure after another, and everyone was pretty much naked and monsters were kidnapping them. And in his version, there was a fate worse than death that was always being threatened to the women, but never explained what it was.
Yeah.
Took me years after I read those to know what the fate worse than death was.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there's a lot of that, and then there's the Hal Foster and Flash Gordon stuff, and then there I think is in the there's a lot of those post-apocalyptic novels, of course, where you try to build back up civilization, which again were so back in the 20s and 30s. Edgar Rice Burroughs would have been big in the 50s. Things like Canticle for Leibowitz. Have you ever heard of that one?
No.
That's where after a nuclear holocaust, the only thing keeping alive the memory of civilization is a bizarre new version of the Catholic Church.
Okay.
Who follows Saint Leibowitz, which is a Jewish name.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of novels like that. That's just the most famous one from that time period. And then there was Dune, which brought together all these Rococo fantasy elements into a science fiction novel in the early 1960s. So I see all of that as, I'm sure he read a lot of science fiction, as did most comic book people back then. Because half the writers were, refugees from the science fiction pulps who found more steady work in comics as the pulps disappeared. But so I see all of that, but I've never seen all of this stuff combined together.
In this specific way,
in this specific way, so the kind of epic Dune stuff with the Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff with all the Iliad and Odyssey kind of elements too. I find it a really good mix. I like that idea, and I guess I wonder what his, I guess we'll find out as it goes through what his personal beliefs are in like a god or whatever, see how much that comes through. I mean, because obviously there's this real matching of like these gods that have everything and this very primitive man that, like I said before, or like we were talking about before, that doesn't necessarily change that much throughout, his arc supposedly. Just those viewpoints, how they come into play, Yeah. So sorry, go on. No, go ahead. I guess I'm in suspense now. Is this the inspired madman outsider, or is there really an incredible keen brain behind all of this that will make it all come together in the end? Either way, it's fascinating. But usually when I'm reading a long book, I sort of know what I'm reading a little more. Here exactly. It's a lot of unknown territory. For sure. And again, to bring it to this 5th issue, that's where it really feels like to me with this 5th issue. I had these kind of ideas, and it's taken a bit of a turn and introduced a couple of new elements that I really like. And I'm kind of in suspense where I'll probably have to go to my library to see if they have the hardcovers there too, so I can read the issues in between of the ones that I have. Yeah, it's kind of at this point captured me a little bit. I've kind of gotten over that hump, and I'm really enjoying it. I really enjoyed that 5th issue, and it went a lot quicker of a read for me this time. I didn't have to flip back a couple of pages as much, to kind of review, okay, that's this and that. It seemed to start working for me quite a bit with that one. Yeah. Even though we can't remember all the names, I think we now understand who all the different sort of layers of people are. That's right, and their place within the story, even the detail. Yeah, names are always a bad point for me. And then
I kind of looked through issue 7 a little bit, and you were showing some pages from the book too. It's like his panels have changed. They've gotten bigger and more kind of splash pages, as opposed to I'm going to cram as much information into one page as I can.
Right. And well, so I have this out of the library because I right now can't afford to buy the next volume. But later on, he does a huge amount of one-page panels.
Look at that. That's insane.
It's that's very different. I mean,
yeah,
it's
really
shocking to see that after getting used to all the tiny panels.
Wow.
This must be like on issue 10, 11, or 12 here. Yeah, it's just maybe it's a whole issue of single pages. It looks
incredible.
Like
those are really amazing.
Yeah, it might be the entire issue is single page drawings. I think it appeals to my primal comic book fan inside that I wanted the ultimate comic at one point, you know, that just went on forever and got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And the closest thing that I used to have was New Gods by Jack Kirby, which got, you know, cut off before the story was done and everything. Yeah. After 11 issues. But this is not as coherent as Jack Kirby, but
yeah.
But it's more complicated.
Yeah.
So it might become more coherent.
But kind of fill in that niche, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I mentioned in one of the videos too was his transition from what I assume, I don't have confirmation on this, using like a pen or like a nib type style pen for the inking to moving to a brush at the advice of, I think it was Steranko who suggested that change. Did you notice? Because I think the transition happened in issue 5, which would have been the last one that we read. I think the first 4 were with pen or whatever he was using, whatever utensil he was using. And then starting at 5 was brush. There was some of the line work, like some of the, especially the first page of issue 5, where the priests were kind of moving through the landscape. And there was some kind of wind type elements that looked like they had a bit of a softer edge to them. But I didn't notice a dramatic change like I thought I might. From one to the other. It wasn't, I thought it would be more dramatic, but
I was reading issue 5 last night at 10 o'clock at night and I was kind of sleepy.
Yeah.
But now that as I look at it, there is a slightly softer look.
Mm-hmm.
It's not hugely dramatic. It's not like his style changes though.
No.
But it maybe has less cross hatching a little bit.
And I mean, you'd think regardless of the tool, if he's going to just, I mean, those pages you showed were incredible. Those full pages, so incredible. Just even in those, you can sense a change of the style too because I mean, the first issues are rougher for sure. There's a rougher edge to them. And I don't know if that's necessarily because of the scale. There's so much in it as opposed to like having the full page. But obviously that's the other thing that I think will be fascinating going through this is seeing his style adapt and just change. And because even in those big pages you shown, they weren't crammed full. It looks like he was transitioning to more staging and you know, that sort of thing.
Right. There's more space in the pictures. I'm glancing them at as you talk, but I don't know. I mean, the whole pace of the story will change when it's all these huge panels.
Totally.
It's almost going to be a bit of a shock, I think.
Yeah.
I'm so used to poring over each page. And But what was I going to say? I lost track of my thought. I was craving, you know, with this kind of Sunday comics approach that he took to it. There's a regular comic book has more resting points sometimes when things slow down and stuff.
Yes.
And it so I'm kind of looking forward to those bigger panels. Maybe it'll be more of a resting point. And maybe issue 5, like with his period of training and stuff, it did kind of slow down.
It really did, which I think made it more digestible. Yeah.
Yeah. That could have happened on one page the way issue 1 was done. it's like maybe he's relaxed. Maybe he feels like now I've got my story set up and I can do what I really wanted to do now or something.
That's right. Yeah, I've set the whole stage and set the world. Yeah. Now I've got 20 more issues to really, it's madness to me. It's dedication, and I admire that. It's really impressive. The story is kind of more forefront for sure now, but there's still that idea of him is, I don't know, it impresses me quite a bit. It's nice to have, and again, like I said in the videos, I'd love to get all the original issues just to have that, to see them as they were presented, and
I do too, especially because these don't have the covers. Yeah. Which I think are pretty important for setting the stage, or at least on those early ones that you've showed.
Mm-hmm. And are they, I think I asked you this before, they're 6 issues per hardcover?
Yes. So the first 4 hardcover are the 24 issues.
Okay.
And then the other ones, maybe they are somehow connected to the First Kingdom, so that's why they're putting them under that title. Mm-hmm. But they aren't the original graphic novel. Uh-huh. So I'll eventually buy all of the first 4, and then I'll decide. Maybe I'll look at the later volumes from the library too before I buy them. Yeah. These are, because I've been complaining a lot in videos, these are well bound, well put together comics. They lay flat if you did double page spreads, which you didn't do, but yeah. So they are very nice volumes, and I think they're about $20 or $25 a piece, which is cover price of $25, which is a good price.
Yeah, ever since you've made that video, that's all I look at anymore. I mean, it was always kind of in the back of my head for sure, but since watching that video and seeing you, this is driving me crazy, it's like that's the first thing I look at now. I just watched a guy's video. He was talking about Nick Fury and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Omnibus, and as he was going through it and showing off, it was like the first thing I was thinking, like, wow, look how flat that lays. That looks pretty good. Besides all the art, and he's showing these fold outs and everything that were incredible, but it's like, wow, that sits really nicely as he's displaying it.
Yeah, and the Marvel omnibuses seem like I got to figure out which Marvel omnibuses I want and stop thinking about the DC ones, I guess. Yeah. Earl Grey just today, I think, put out a video where he talked about bindings some more.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
And he has way more experience with hardcovers than I do. Yeah. So it's very good to listen to his video.
Yeah. No, and it's an important one too. Like that's an important topic. That just to kind of take a little detour, that Nick Fury Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I don't have any of the Marvel omnibuses. That's one I'm saving up for. It looks, it's beautiful looking. Everything looked amazing.
And that probably has a cover price of like $75 or $100.
I think actually not that much. I think in the comments he had said that it was $49.99. Now I don't know if that means that's what he paid for it, or if that was the cut price. I don't know what that number represented.
Oh, okay.
But
a lot of those ones,
it didn't seem as much, because I was thinking in the 100 plus.
A lot of those omnibuses you can get for about $50 by going to like something like In Stock Trades, or hopefully there's an equivalent in Canada, but.
I haven't found anything yet. Yeah, there might be, but I haven't done that much digging.
But yeah, I don't know the price of that particular one. But certainly when you pay a lot of money for these big ones, that binding becomes an important issue.
Sure. Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted that we didn't talk about already that you had in mind for this series so far?
No, it was interesting to compare to my memories. As a kid, I completely misunderstood what was going on. Uh-huh. So maybe because I didn't have consecutive issues or something, I thought that Earth was actually populated by astronauts who then became cavemen and are now building up their civilization again so they can reach the stars again. I don't know where I got that idea.
Oh, I see.
But that was what I was sure. That's what I was sure that was what this book was about. So that was another layer for me of confusion when I went in there. It's like, how did I get
that? Would be a neat idea too, though.
Yeah. And that was maybe a kind of a popular idea in the 70s too, of, you know, alien visitations and seeding Earth or something.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah, I wish it was a little bit better, but I'm still fascinated by it. Like, I wish I cared about the characters some more or something. And I think it's his writing.
Yeah, and it really is. His writing is really tough because he has this. The thing I was thinking today was when, you know, for example, watching like the Hobbit movies or something, that kind of voiceover. I hear that type of movie voiceover when I read a lot of that text explaining what's going on. I hear this booming voice of, and so he came forth and da 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 da, and just, it's tough. It really kind of crushes you sometimes as far as, and especially once I realized that with this fifth one, that's all I could hear. The voice was this booming, telling you who is going here and he is going to rise, and you know, it's a little much, but I'm managing to keep through it. The other thing that impressed me with this one too was the female character that's been now introduced, the young girl who was born, and her place in this whole story and her place in the world and within her tribe, I think is fantastic too, because there have been a lot of really strong female characters in this, going through the whole 5 issues. There's not as many stereotypes on that side, even though the male masculine thing is really at the forefront. He doesn't kind of fall back on, well, I'm going to have all the females as the mother figures in this, that, and the other. There is those for sure, but there's plenty of strong female leads as well, which I really enjoy.
Yeah. There's quite the scene where she puts all her brothers in their place and that kind of stuff.
Love that one. That was fantastic. Yeah. And then when it came time for her to be the leader, just kind of looking at him as, does anybody disagree? Because if you do, I'll kick your ass again. You know, like it was great. Really great.
Well, she is another example of how this kind of screws with my mind, because she has the soul of one of the goddesses put into her. But we've just been told
that Sellowan, I think was her name. Sellowan.
Right. Who was in love with Darkenmore. So I assume that she'll now be in love with Darkenmore's son.
That's right.
When they eventually meet.
And that was, just to kind of back up a little bit, that was her request, because she was going to be punished for, there was all this punishment that was happening, that anytime people would interfere with the humanoids or the humans, they would be punished. And her punishment was going to be go to their hell. She found kind of a loophole, I guess, through her mother, that she could request to have her soul put into a human, so she could live out her other life as a human. Yeah.
So her body's still in hell, but her soul is in the body of a child.
Correct.
And I guess she'll live out a human life and then die.
Yes, that's what I got from it.
But she also may be a mutated robot and not really a god.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So it's a girl with the soul of a mutated robot inside of her.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's what gets me back into the Philip K. Dick territory.
Yeah.
And that's where my brain starts going, I don't know. But yeah, it's I hope we learn more about this hell creature and stuff, because so
do I.
The gods part fascinates me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of rich territory there for sure. Yeah.
Right. It still feels predictable that Farah, I think is her name now, the Sellowan soul, and Tundran are going to go through all kinds of trials and tribulations, and eventually meet and fall in love and have more trials and get separated, bring back together, get separated, bring back together, and eventually start the first kingdom, the real first kingdom. And
then die horribly, and
right, and then their children will build spaceships or something. Well, what do you make of the character of the Oracle?
I kind of like it. Sorry, say that again.
Do you think he's a god, or is he some separate being?
He seems to be something separate. He just happens to, he's kind of like the Yoda, I guess.
Right.
He seems to know all this history of the gods and what they have in store for them, but he really seems to be outside every single character that we've been introduced to so far. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll see what happens with him. The character kind of annoyed me at first because of all those things. Of every time he showed up, it's like, you just have to listen to what I'm saying and you don't have a choice. And it kind of bothered me a little bit. And then he appeared again in this issue 5 for Tundrin, and then gave him that test where he kind of his lizard or snake on his staff came alive and bit him to see if he would survive. So I'm hoping he plays a little more of an interesting role, because I'm not kind of taken with that yet. It's again just like we said before, it's just another reminder of like, okay, yes, we know that Darkenmore is, like, for the first 4 issues, we know Darkenmore is going to die. We know, yes, okay, you can, it seemed to be used over and over again. But I mean, at the time, if these are released once every 6 months, those kind of characters, I don't know if you needed it, but would have helped remind you of like, hey, remember last time 6 months ago when you read that last issue? If you read it,
wouldn't have been so repetitive.
Yeah. So I hope he doesn't fall back on that character too much.
I feel even with the repetition, if I read this each issue 6 months apart, I would be pretty lost.
Yeah, it seems like it for sure.
As I talk to you, I'm getting entranced by the visuals, though. I can look at this book forever, it seems like.
Well, and I don't think I'll be able to stop myself. I'll probably just keep going through these ones, even though they do jump. I think the last one that I have is book 14 is as far as I go. So I have book 9, book 10, 11, and 14. And one that intrigues me that's coming up, the cover for book 10 is one that kind of stood out for me as well as something that looked incredible. That idea of whatever that image is going to tell us.
What does it say on the cover? I can't quite make out the words at the bottom.
It says the Itelects, preservers of humankind.
Huh.
And
now,
then
seeing covers is helpful because the characters women have different color hair.
Yes, yeah. And I'll just kind of show you the rest of the covers here. So this is book 11 called The Survivors. And then book 14 with a drastic change in art in book 14 called Space Pirates.
Ugh. I don't like that cover
that was
at all.
what I thought too.
Have you looked at the interior art on that one?
Probably when I first got it, I did. I haven't since I've been reading these. I've been really focused on the issues, but I'll probably go through and look. And another one that didn't strike me, it's a little messy, book 9, Mutiny, which it looks like maybe we get a little more taste of what happened to the astronauts, if that's what this is portraying.
I had that issue.
Oh, really? Hey, yeah.
I must have found that years later, because that must be much later. I remember that they made a trade at some point of the first 5 issues or so. Okay. So I remember I had individual issues, and then I got the trade when I was in college or something.
Yeah.
But I don't think they ended up doing a trade of all the issues ever before now.
Yeah. And just to further the yuck factor, so this is the back cover of issue 14. I don't know what's going on those covers, but the art seems to have really but the interiors are the same though, same kind of idea. So
good, that looks fun.
Nothing drastically changed there.
It's partially maybe a change in colorists, although still that front cover is kind of
it's pretty hideous. Yeah.
So, well, you've for a while on your station, your channel, we were hearing you talk about Marvel books and stuff, but now you've gone back into the weirder fringes of ground level comics. Yeah,
for sure. And
I feel like all those 2000 AD related reprint kind of things are closer to the spirit of this kind of stuff. Slightly kookier, more like those ground level comics of the 70s than American commercial comics.
And really more, as I've said a million different times, more of my passion, the stuff that I've been finding lately and reading this. And I mean, I love reading the Marvel stuff. And today I picked up just 4 issues. I picked up Monstrous. I picked up the 2 We Stand on Guard. And I picked up another one that I can't even remember. So, I mean, that's how much some of this is. I feel like I'm kind of making a shift. As much as I love reading the Marvel with Mr. Tom, with my son. Now that I'm discovering these 50-cent bins and finding all these great comics, that I have this newfound excitement again for some of these weirder titles and wanting to explore that. I feel like I've explored enough of the Marvel world that I enjoy it, and I'm not going to abandon it by any stretch, but I'm getting newfound excitement out of these rediscoveries, you know, and something that's hitting me a little differently, which is nice to find again, you know. Not that I felt like I was getting tired of anything by any stretch, that I needed to be revitalized.
Right.
It's just been a nice gift, you know.
Well, and have you gotten to read any of the what's it called? The Rogue Trooper?
I read 1 issue of it so far. The one that not the most recent one that I got, but a little bit before issue 11, I think it was. It was okay. It didn't blow me away as much as I thought it would, but I think it's going to be one of those characters like the serialized characters where you get this idea of this guy, and he's kind of like the representative of this little individual story. He's going to play that role, some role in these individual tales that are going to include all these other characters, which is a cool idea. It didn't blow me away, but I didn't dislike it either. It was just kind of okay. But I feel I'm still at this point with that character especially, that I just don't have enough basis for these characters, the Strontium Dog and 2080 stuff, period, or the Judge Dreads. I just, that world is alien to me. I'm entering new territory, so it's going to take a little bit of adjustment, I think.
I wish you lived next door so I could loan you some comics. I have the more recently IDW reprinted Rogue Trooper in color. And so I have the first few issues, so I get the beginning of Rogue Trooper. And it was drawn by Gibbons, you know, the Watchmen artist.
So it's new stories then?
No, it's old.
Oh, okay.
So IDW started a new series with American creators, or international creators, really, because I think the artist was Italian or something. But at the same time, they reprinted what they called Rogue Trooper Classics.
I see.
I don't have them anywhere nearby, but they didn't.
I have seen some of them. Yeah.
They didn't fill the entire page because the comic they were originally printed in was actually larger but wider. So they just kind of, you know, were smaller pictures in the page. But anyway, it's both very primitive and appealing. The Rogue Trooper, all his buddies from his troop died, and he put their computer chips that have their personalities in his weapons and his helmet and his back. And he just wanders around talking to his equipment. And
well, and that was the thing that took me a little bit to get into in this one issue I read, because there was a little skull with the number 1, 2, or 3 beside it that would appear and then say something to him. And at first I'm like, what the hell is that supposed to be? But then in that little story, they actually explained it a little bit, that these are the kind of information, or the souls, I guess, for lack of a better word, for his other friends, I guess. So
I was a bit surprised seeing your haul that there were so many Rogue Troopers, because I figured they would have run out of material after a while. It was a very simplistic story that I read. I liked it a lot, though. Because I was paying $4 an issue, you know, for these reprints. So that's usually, I don't like to pay that much. So
yeah, and that's my hope, that it doesn't get too old, and if it does, I mean, I don't know. I have a little bit of high hopes in the back of my head. I'm especially excited about this Strontium Dog, and I think it's more because the art in that really appeals to me. That artist, which is also why I think that some of the Judge Dredd stuff might appeal to me, being the same artist. I can't express it enough, seeing it in front of me, that art and that coloring and that style, and I don't know, everything just looks incredibly vivid and just looks really nice to my eyes right now. And I don't know if that's a right now thing, because I've come across these comics throughout my comic reading life on and off. It hasn't appealed to me the way that it is now for some reason. I don't know why that is yet. So.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I read things differently that I know are old quirky books that no one wants anymore.
Yeah,
they take on a different patina or something, and I
Mm-hmm.
Compared to when I buy the latest copy of Saga or something, I have a different
Yeah.
approach to reading it. Did you get Headlopper?
No, and I saw you held that up, and it's like, that's the one that I forgot to pick up because I was going to grab it.
Did you get the first issue of it?
I did, yes.
And did you enjoy that?
I did. Again, like I really responded to the art in it. Like the story was adequate. It moved along, but there was nothing that jumped out at me. But I love the look of it, and I love that it's this thick book. Is the second issue just as thick as the first one?
It feels very thick. I can't say for sure if it's just as thick, but it feels like the size of 3 comics.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's great.
So it's quite thick. It's quite thick. I liked the story. Obviously wasn't really that much, and I haven't read issue 2 yet, but I liked the way it was written. And sometimes when an artist is the writer, there's problems, but I liked the way it worked out. Yeah, it seems like when an artist who is also the writer gets it right, the art and the writing are integrated in this really nice way. It's kind of the opposite of Jack Katz. I mean, the writing just floats over the art as if it's almost has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And maybe that's a artist trying too hard to be a writer, or what he thinks is a writer in his mind.
I just remember the other one I got was the Paper Girls #3. That was the one I picked up because I'm curious to see what the hell is going to happen.
Yeah, I like that more and more. I did manage to read #3 the other day, and I liked it quite a bit, but I have a feeling other people are not going to like it as it gets further and further away from Paper Girls in the Suburbs to something else entirely.
See, and that's the part that excites me. I want to see where it's going, because the first one did nothing for me, really. The second one really showed me something that was like, oh, hey, this might actually be really good. So I've a bit of high hopes. I'm trying to keep that contained a little bit, but I've got high hopes for 3.
Yeah, I would say the 3rd issue implies we're going just crazier and crazier.
Awesome.
We'll see. It's hard to. Brian K. Vaughan is enjoyably unpredictable. I mean, don't you think? It's hard to predict where he's going, even though it feels familiar. Yeah. Like We Stand on Guard had me puzzled throughout. Yeah, I should, if I have energy before.
Read #6 of that one too? Did you read the final one?
I have not read the final one.
Okay. No. Yeah.
Paper Girls was actually from the previous week, so I
I
haven't finished comics from the previous week, and I haven't read anything from this week.
Okay.
I always feel like I need to read the Batman first, so I won't get it spoiled.
Yeah. Yeah, since there's so many people talking about it. Yeah. And I think, just to touch on it briefly, that's something that I feel like I'm really craving, which is why I'm going through these bins. I'm looking for something to surprise me. I feel like there's not as much as I'm enjoying the Marvel titles and some of the other titles that I'm reading. I'm looking for something to surprise me again, as far as an angle of a story, or a direction, or an idea, or even if it's something that I've seen a million times, a different presentation of it, something that's going to go, oh wow, I never thought of that. That's an incredible idea. I have this craving for some different writing right now. So I think my hopes of these small publishers and these other weird titles that I'm going to find it there, who knows if I will, but.
Right. Well, I saw you picked up Warp.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Which is an odd, quirky thing, but still has a superhero feel to it, because the artists involved were superhero. But it was a play originally.
Oh, that's right. Yes, you guys were saying.
And the movie Reanimator?
Oh yes, of course. I love that movie. Yeah, yeah.
The group that made that play went on to be the studio, the theater, the movie group that made Reanimator and a bunch of other bizarro movies.
Really?
So I wish there was a video somewhere of, that someone videotaped what Warp was like as a stage show.
Yeah, yeah.
I think maybe even some of the actors from Reanimator might have been in the play.
In the stage performance. That's incredible.
And I think it played on Broadway or off Broadway, somewhere in New York. It came from like Chicago, I think.
Okay.
And I think it made it to New York City for like a week and then flopped. And that was the end of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But when they went to New York City, Neil Adams did the stage design and all kinds of things like that.
Oh, wow.
And apparently it's a 30th anniversary trade that's coming out that's going to include the Neil Adams designs and stuff.
See, I seem to have this ability to do this, picking up these comics that all of a sudden get released in these big, nice trades.
Right. They've been
Boz Chronicles that I started reading, and all of a sudden I see a hardcover of the Boz Chronicles.
Maybe publishers follow you around in comic book stores and see what you're
right. They watch my videos, clearly, yes. I'm on the cutting edge, Damian. Didn't you know that? Yeah.
Yeah, and I just collected all the Warp about a year or two ago. I don't want to buy the trade, but maybe we'll get it out of the library to see the Neil Adams designs and stuff.
How many issues was there?
I want to say like 16 or 18.
Okay. Yeah.
And eventually Frank Brunner left, and the guy who now draws Fables became the artist. Buckingham or something.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Buckingham, Cunningham, something. Yeah, that's right. Okay, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
I mean, Willingham does the writing, and I think Buckingham does the art.
Yeah.
I think it was. But Willingham used to be an artist too, so I don't know. Now I'm wondering which it was.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely, even though it was published in the 80s, I think the play must have been in the 70s, and it's definitely that, comic books meet Rocky Horror Picture Show kind of wackiness.
Happiness, yeah.
So it's a fun little item.
For sure, and that's also been a bonus of doing these videos on these comics. There's a lot of great comments, especially from you and Johnny Zero, who was super excited to have 2 shout-outs one from each of us in videos. It's great that it seems like there's a lot of people who have that history, as much as they may read, a little more quote-unquote mainstream comics now. That's
right.
It's great. I don't know, and I think maybe it pairs in with the discovery of the history of this first kingdom, because it was around the time of starting to read this that I started looking through more cheap bins and pulling some stuff out. And
right.
It's it's just finding something to excite me a little more so than I already am about the whole format,
Right. And even though they aren't watching our videos to decide what to publish, it does feel like maybe we're part of a generation that wants to re-examine stuff that came before that has been sort of pushed aside, but now we're saying, look, there were some interesting things going on. And
for sure. Well, and the other thing that keeps happening too is seeing some of this and discovering names in these comics of either artists or writers who are a deal now. They're a bigger deal now.
Right.
The biggest one for me was the old Dark Horse Presents. All of a sudden there's a 4-issue story by Brubaker who's now obviously Brewmaker, and now it's like, well, here's the early thing that he did. There's an excitement of that too, seeing some early work from some creators that I really like now. It's seeing their kind of growth. Again, the whole thing with this First Kingdom, being able to see an artist's growth over 12 years is an impressive thing to be able to witness too, to see how a style does change, or if it does change dramatically, or or storytelling methods, period. I love that kind of stuff. I really like that thing.
Was the Brubaker thing drawn by Brubaker?
I think it was. I haven't dug in because I'm still missing 1 or 2 of the issues that have the story, so I haven't dug in and read it yet, or really examined it. I have quite a few gaps in that kind of Dark Horse Present, so I haven't dug into those yet.
Because I think he started as someone who wrote and drew his own comics and was more kind of I don't know because I haven't found the comics, but more like a Daniel Close kind of writer.
Yeah.
And then slowly started doing more kind of detective stories, and then got into superhero comics, which is kind of an odd trajectory. But
I see that. Just speaking of him, I just read yesterday that he's a writer on the televised. There's going to be TV series Westworld. From the old movie Westworld, they're doing a TV series that he's a writer on, and Anthony Hopkins, I think, is going to star in it, which will be interesting to see. So,
Jean Paul Ace Peter mentioned something called Moondog by George Metzger, but I've never heard of that, so maybe that's something else to look for.
Yeah, the title Moondog is reminiscent, but I don't know where I've heard it before.
Yeah, so he says the art style is similar to First Kingdom. Moondog.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd say if he's still watching, I don't know if they're still on there, but I say go for it. Just check it out, and that's I think the other thing. I've had some positive responses to the videos, that just reminding people of stuff that they have in their collection, or I don't know. I like that kind of stuff. I like that. There's been all this talk lately about community and things, and I don't want to get into it too much by any stretch. Just the idea that we all are here to enjoy comics, and I love that a video by whoever of us can trigger something and somebody go, hey, that sounds really cool, or hey, I think I have one of those issues in my collection, and kind of even digging through your own collection. I mean, I don't know how many boxes. I saw some boxes in your back closet there, but it's sometimes they just get in these boxes and you forget about them. It's nice to kind of flip through, and I don't reread my comics like I revisit movies. Me and Johnny Zero were talking about revisiting books or movies and things, and I don't really do that with my comics, which is maybe a shame. Some series that I've really enjoyed, have a look at them now again after however many years, and see if there's anything else that pops up in those stories, like it does for movies for me. So it's nice to be able to contribute and remind people, I guess, is the gist of it.
Well, you getting First Kingdom made me actually read First Kingdom rather than just look at the pictures. I mean, I had bought the trade 2 years ago, I think, or a year and a half ago. And now you picked up Vermilion, and I have the whole Vermilion run, which I think I read when it first came out. I mean, I think I read it to the end when it first came out. I know I read a lot of it. But I'd like to reread it now and see whether, because my memory's a bit faded on it. But it's a writer who I've read a lot of his prose work, his short stories. But and he died about a year ago, I think. Oh, okay. Unfortunately, he was actually.
The art in that looks incredible. From him. Sorry to cut you off. Say that again. I cut you off there.
He was someone I took some writing classes from in the '80s.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
And we were friends for a while. But he was a drunk, and after a while, I didn't like hanging out with him. But I still respect him a lot as a writer.
Yeah.
But those are the only comics he ever wrote, to my knowledge.
Okay.
And I don't know how committed he was to comics, but.
And Johnny, again, don't mean to keep bringing him up, but it just so happens I've talked to him a lot. He says that the comic series is very kind of dreamlike, and if you're kind of like being put into this moment and experiencing this story as it goes along, it's perfect for that. Was his other writing similar to that, or was it more cemented in something, or what was his prose writing like?
Was a dream. He was kind of a cross between magical realism and more genre fantasy and sci-fi.
Okay, yeah.
And kind of like very much 100 Years of Solitude kind of writing at times. So very thick, dense prose, which was a weird choice for him to become a comic book writer.
Oh, really? Yeah.
But my memory of it is that it was full of cool stuff, but I felt like he was just getting going and then it got canceled. That he's such a long game kind of person that he was just working up to whatever really great ideas he might have had.
And there was no time.
He could have been like Jack Katz if he wasn't an alcoholic, I think. But so like he was most famous for his novellas.
Okay.
Like he won a bunch of Nebulas and Hugos, and they were always for novellas. And he wrote a few novels, but most of what he wrote was novellas. which are very long-winded stories, right? They're instead of writing short stories, he wrote very long stories, but he didn't write novels. But he always had all these ideas for these great novels that he would tell me about, and it drove me crazy when I realized they were never going to get written.
Yeah.
But there's all different kinds of writers, and so you would think if you can write novellas, you could write novels, but he just never made that leap very well. But one of his novels that did get published was actually an amalgam of some novellas, and it sold to Hollywood for some huge amount of money. And so this is just a total aside. For a while I would meet up with him, and he would have $100 bills stuffed into his pockets.
Wow.
And he would just be buying for everybody. I think it was the guy who did Titanic who optioned his novel, and that's why I had so much money. And then he never made a Barfly. Sorry?
And then he turned into the character from Barfly, Drink for All My Friends.
He was already pretty much a character from Barfly. A science fiction nerd version of that, I suppose. He was also someone, his name is Lucius Shepard, and he was someone you never knew which stories were true or not. But he claimed in his youth to have traveled the entire world as a drug dealer.
Oh, yeah.
A small-time drug dealer. And I don't know if that was true or not.
I work with a couple of guys who are similar in as far as like you don't know what they're if it's 100% true, but goddamn, there's some fantastic stories, true or not. It's some good storytelling.
Yeah, it made him a good writer, and his stories took place all around the world and stuff. I think with Vermilion, I have a feeling he was hoping to get a cash cow. So I think probably he and probably lots of other people thought, well, if I can do the next Sandman, then I'll have it made. So I think he was aiming towards Sandman territory with Vermilion, and that might be the dreamlike quality too.
Do you think that there was this thought of like, I can just fire this shit out and just get it out there and it's going to be a hit and it's going to take me no effort whatsoever? Do you know if he took that
I'm
kind
sure
of approach
he put effort into it, because he was, despite his alcoholism, he was someone who believed in like pouring your blood, sweat, and tears into your work. But I do think in general, science fiction writers, until maybe recently, I don't know what they think now, but in the past, they always thought comics were a place to go make a fast buck.
A quick,
And they were thinking it's just a side project, just like I might write an article for a magazine, but I'm really working on my novel. I might write a comic book, but I'm really working on my novel. Kind of attitude. And I don't think nowadays comics puts up with people like that. So that's kind of one improvement of.
Well, I don't know if there's many avenues to deal with that even. I mean, because I'm assuming a lot of these people would have written for a lot of the anthologies. It seems like there was more, even with Eclipse and PC, those Tales of Terror, et cetera, all these kind of short anthologies that lasted, 10, 12 issues with 2 or 3 stories in it. There was more room to experiment with stuff like that. Now it's people want a series and they want one writer and there's one guy doing an anthology, you know what I mean? Or that sort of thing. So.
Well, and I think there was probably a period in the Vertigo, well, it's Helix, right?
That's right. Helix was this Vermilion,
where they were bringing in prose science fiction writers and hoping something would stick. And probably some of them were better than others, but so it feels like during the late 90s and maybe up to the early 2000s, I would occasionally see the name of a writer that I recognized from the science fiction prose world, but I don't see that anymore. And whenever you hear interviews with people like, say, Brubaker, all they do is talk about movies and TV. They never mention books.
That's true.
So I think the whole mindset of the comic book writing world is either Hollywood kind of people or just people who love comic books. I think the people who love comic books are the best writers anyway, but and Brubaker is obviously both. He loves comic books too. I don't think he's just doing it to get to Hollywood. But
no, it doesn't seem to be, but that is where his passions seem to lie, even just following his books through the career, that back matter is always, he's always talking about a TV series that he loves or a movie that really resonated with him and that sort of thing. So.
Right. Well, your man, Harry Harrison, used to write comic books, I think maybe in the 50s or something.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a bunch of people that I used to see writing comics that I don't see anymore. Richard Kadri, I don't know if anyone remembers that name, but
no,
he was writing comics for a while, and he's a science fiction writer. Yeah. One thing I'm sad about comics is that there is less of a connection to the prose world anymore.
So kind of on a personal interjection here. So is that kind of what brought you into, I mean, I know that you've been in and out and back and forth with comics. Was that kind of an idea of getting some of these prose sci-fi writers into a different format to see an evolution of the writing, or a more condensed, sharper writing style?
I suppose, like when I saw Lucius Shepard writing a comic book, I was excited, but it's more that I appreciated when comic book writers had a literary side to them. Yeah. So Neil Gaiman, for instance, if you read Sandman, he's not drawing on movies. He's drawing on fable and myth and things he read in books.
Yes.
And I don't think you have that kind of writer anymore. I don't think even someone who I like, who's a very intelligent writer like Jonathan Hickman, I don't think he's drawing very much on a deep background of reading authors. But even people like Roy Thomas and the like, they were reading all these novelists who were popular science fiction writers and other kinds of novelists at the time. But I always recognize the science fiction elements. But clearly they knew, Philip Jose Farmer and Harlan Ellison and all those people. They were familiar with their work, and there were elements that moved into their comics from those worlds.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't get the sense of that. Maybe it's from listening to the interviews where people are always talking about movies, but.
Well, and I think that's just something that for a different generation is just, that's what's resonating. Yeah. And I like the idea too of, again, just one of the things that just bothers me is the kind of drifting nature of some writers, especially now that we have this whole TV comic movie type world. I mean, it was my biggest complaint about Jessica Jones, this drifting filler type of thing, that I like the idea of having a certain writer who's used to a certain style or a long form. I like the idea of parameters, of some sort of parameters. So you have this single issue or a 12-issue miniseries where now you have this long form story that you really have to sharpen up and really condense and really analyze your story and what you want to say. And, it offers a little more. And the Stainless Steel Rat was a really good comparison for me, I think, right now, along all these same mindsets of reading half the book, seeing that half of the book represented in one comic, and how they took care of some of the issues of storytelling, which I thought they did really well. There were some aspects that I really liked, the way they combined a few ideas into one kind of quote unquote scene or page or that sort of thing. I like that kind of condensing, as much as I'm still enjoying to some degree, I'm enjoying the books. They're kind of hitting a little odd spot for me, but I do like, obviously, you can really get more of a sense of the world where all that extra writing you're just seeing in a panel, so just presenting it in a different format is fascinating, and seeing what they do with it. So. Yeah.
So are you partially referring to the fact that modern comic book writers sometimes are writing things that are basically never going to end?
It seems to be, yeah. And I mean, that's something that always bothers me, or that they're so epic that there's no, like we touched on with the First Kingdom, it's so epic that I hope that he has an idea in mind, because I don't want to get kind of trapped in that world of, well, here we go. Here's the Hickman big event that's going to span across all these issues, and then at the end of it, it's not really going to have a resolution, and what are we ultimately going to learn, and what's kind of the, you know, reading for enjoyment is one thing, but I think I'm at this point in my reading where I need something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, that's going to have something to say specifically and have some idea that this writer really wants to present me. I'm kind of craving that to some degree. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, I find that well, you mentioned Hickman and you were talking about his Marvel work, right?
Mhm.
I find that most a problem with Marvel and DC. I don't know if the writers are encouraged to do this or they just do it because they're allowed to. But it seems like, well, I've been following more DC than Marvel, but it seems like a lot of things I was following just never resolved. Or it seemed like they resolved, but then they picked the story back up after the resolution rather than come up with a new story.
That's right.
And then eventually the writer leaves and some other writer kind of shifts everything away. And there, like you say, there's no real resolution. Those Hickman books, at least, I think he stays on till the end, but they are so long that it's more like he was just stretching it out for as long as possible and then ending it with an end that might have been good after 3 issues rather than 300.
Well, and I wonder sometimes, you know, going back to the sci-fi writers writing for comics, if it's almost like a chance for guys like Hickman to flex a little bit, like to flex that muscle and keep things going for their own work. It's like, well, I'll just go and flex that writing muscle for Marvel and sort of half-ass it. And I don't want to say that he half-assed everything, because that's not really what I mean by that. Just that idea though. Yeah, because I mean, it seems almost like a cop-out, and I think maybe, again, it's all kind of tying in as we're talking about it, that maybe that's what I am searching for with these other, going back to these other ones. I know that a certain series has lasted this many issues, so I know that if I go to pick up Vermilion, I know that it's going to be 1 to 18 or whatever the number. Like I know that I'm going to get this chunk that might contain a story, not something that I'm currently reading that. Is this going to go on 20 issues? Is it going to go on 40? Are they going to change creators? You know, there's the ability to pick and choose what I'm going to write. You know, it's a 6-issue miniseries of Stainless Steel Rat. I know that I have a contained 3 stories here, you know, so.
Well, I think, you know, people like Hickman and Aaron and Brubaker are really almost superhumanly talented writers. And I think people don't realize how hard it is to do what they do.
I
but
agree.
I think part of how they manage to write so many books and keep things going is they've developed this talent for making issue by issue feeling like you need to read the next issue, and having this large nested kind of story, but they haven't necessarily developed the talent of a short story writer of including your story. And the old comic book writers were the opposite. They had to learn how to conclude a story every issue almost, or you know, every few issues at the least, and they found ways to do that, but they weren't always doing they often used cheats and stuff, so it's kind of a new kind of talent of dragging things out, but maybe not the talent of short stories or shorter stories.
Well, it's a good point too of leaving you wanting more, because there's a real development of pacing that happens. Oh, sorry, Mike is falling over there. A real development of pacing for the Brubakers of the world and people like that. Sorry, just adjusting there. That I also appreciate. That I like that idea of, again, it's all about the parameters, right? Like when I was playing music and improvising music with different players, it was about putting parameters on ourselves. Like we're going to follow kind of this format and we're going to see what we can do within it, and how that translates to other worlds, which is why, you know, I've always been a big film and TV, or film mostly, watcher, that I'm interested to see how a guy like Brubaker's storytelling that's pretty sharp and concise and knows when to end and how to leave you on a cliffhanger will go on an episodic, as far as stretching it out a little bit for 42 minutes and how he's going to work all of that. I'm looking forward to it. So I see just on the side here. Sorry, go on. Yep.
Oh, it looks like Jean Paul's Peter's been writing a lot.
Yeah, that's fine. Go on, continue your thought though. Sorry.
Well, just on Brubaker on Westworld.
Yeah.
First of all, Westworld doesn't, well, it could be really great, But it
Yeah.
seems like something that works as a one-shot movie or whatever, you know. And,
I agree. Yeah.
you know, and everything goes wrong, and then at the end, you know, you fight with Yul Brynner, and then it's over.
Yeah, that's right. I totally agree, and I'm curious how that's going to play out too. But I think my excitement is more that
If Brubaker is
gonna
in
see him writing
charge,
TV.
is he in charge? Is he like the head writer or something?
I haven't looked that far into it. I just kind of did a little bit of digging as I was digging for some other things. It kind of came up in the periphery, but I don't know if he's a head writer or not. No.
I mean, Brubaker seems to bring stories to conclusion a lot more than some of the other people.
Yes.
But there's an incredible art, I think, of writing each episode, so you want to get to the next episode and that kind of thing.
For sure.
And so maybe they'll do that very well in Westworld. It's that Lost kind of thing, right? A lot of comics resemble Lost, but there was never any conclusion to Lost that could carry the weight of all those episodes.
I hear you. I thought the conclusion carried it a little bit, but maybe not as fully. Yeah.
I actually didn't get to the end of Lost. I'm just going by people complaining about it.
Yeah.
So sorry, maybe that was an unfair thing for me.
No, not at all. No, for sure. I think it's a good point though, because it again goes back to how long you can draw this out. When 24 is my greatest example. When that first season of 24 came out, which was kind of following this guy for 24 hours in this government spy type of job, the idea of we're going to see one season where we see a 24-hour period of his life was incredible. And the first season was incredible for that reason. And it all got thrown to shit when they decided to do a second and third season. It's like, well, same thing with Lost. It's almost like that Marvel DC, let's just do this huge event and we'll just go forever. And then eventually we'll have some ending. I think when you just go these long times, no matter what the ending is, it's just not going to do it because you've just milked it for way too long. And it's the same with the Marvel events. It's some of this, it just gets milked for so long that by the time I get to the end, I don't even give a shit because there's nothing that you can show me now at this point that's going to impress me because you've bored the hell out of me to some degree on some of them. The Secret Wars, I have no interest in anymore. I know that issue 8 just came out or whatever. I really have lost interest because it's just blown its load for me, that it's not treading any territory where I don't even care what you have to tell me at the end. I've lost interest. I don't give a shit, you know, and we'll read it because Mr. Tom wants to read it, right? So I will eventually get to see it. But
well, I read 2 of the miniseries, and I will eventually digitally, or maybe eventually digitally, read the Secret Wars. But both of the ones that I read Thor's and A-Force, totally fizzled by the last issue. They had so much promise. And that seems to be, you know, that'll keep people buying the comics, and then you reboot, and then the people hope all over again. Although I think Jason Aaron on Thor it seems so far like he can pull that off. But it is a long stretched out story with the female Thor now. They spent an entire volume waiting to reveal who the female Thor was.
That's right. Yes.
Now we know, and now there'll be another beat of the story. It's like whole trades are just a beat of a story rather than, you know, the individual issues are not even chapters or anything. They are just portions of a chapter. But it's an art stringing along the readers.
It totally is. Yeah.
Maybe we should look at, I feel like I should know Jean Paul Ace Peter's real name. I feel like I've heard it, but I can't remember because Jean Paul Ace Peter is such a memorable name.
Yeah.
He says he's more of a fan of the art in comics, and finding a good writer comes secondary. But modern writers I've enjoyed would be Bendis on Secret Invasion was really fun.
Yeah.
Bendis has had some very good moments and some very bad moments for me, but Dan Slott on Avengers Initiative, Mark Millar, and some of the, you know, I'm in this maybe a little more towards the writers than Jean Paul Ace Peter, but I'm in the camp where the artist does make a huge difference for me.
Yeah.
And like when he mentions Mark Millar works with really good artists, and that often gets me past some of the Mark Millar stuff that I don't like. And I was noticing like Jupiter's Legacy was way better than Secret Service by Mark Millar.
Okay, yeah.
But although I like Dave Gibbons as an artist, I don't think he worked well with Mark Millar the way the way Frank Quitely did. Frank Quitely.
Yeah, yeah. And just to comment on his comment there, I was in the same boat for a long time and still am. I mean, art really speaks to me a lot more than story. But just to kind of beat a dead horse, it's at this time I'm really striving for a story that's going to catch me. You know, I really have this appetite for it, but I still need some badass art too. I really need it. And Vermilion, as soon as I looked through that first book, I was like, oh wow, it looks beautiful. Same with the interest in the Strontium dogs and all that. Art is still extremely important, but I'm just kind of tired of not having a forward-thinking story, not having I have this idea and there's an ending to it. I need something more out of the writing these days. And it's when you're I say this to super sexy special lady friend all the time, that when we see these great shows, like The Wire is something that I really love. My tolerance for 98% of the other shit that's on TV just is zero, because I've been exposed to something that really resonated with me, and I want more of that. I don't want to have to wade through a bunch of garbage just to find the one gem. I just want the gems, you know, so it makes it tough.
Definitely.
Yeah. And just on that, further on that point, just to again say it, I said it on Twitter today. If anybody wants good writing and isn't watching the show The Affair, if you are a TV fan, it's incredible writing, and the character development is incredible. It's amazing. And it really just rejuvenates me in a way of like, I can't even describe it. There's so much depth to each of the characters who seem like they should be superficial. The episode in itself is incredible. The perspectives they take is incredible. The ideas behind it are really interesting and keeps me thinking about the stories long after the show is over. You know, it's some powerful writing on that show if you can get into it. It's incredible to see. So it's nice to see that there is stuff that does exist, you know.
Where is The Affair broadcast?
That's a show. It's a Showtime one. So there's lots of nudity. There's lots of sex. There's lots of curse words and things like that. But the idea is there. It's not done in any sort of way to exploit those kind of things. They're all very important to the story. It's incredibly important to the story and these people's passions and where they lie and stuff like this. It's impressive storytelling, impressive writing. So
yeah, I've kind of gotten out of the groove of watching TV shows. I mean, I always just used to binge them, get them on DVD or whatever, because I don't get cable. But I assume someday I will again. So I've got to make a list. But for a while, I had no opportunity at all. And now I do have some opportunity, but I'm just sort of not, I'm happy without watching TV at the moment.
Exactly. And I was in the exact same boat for years. I mean, I haven't had cable. We just got rid of cable again. We had it in the house. We just the other day canceled it because we don't watch it. And I don't watch it, and I don't have interest because 98% of it is shit. It's just absolute garbage. That I have.
And if you can wait, you can get the good shows, you know, on DVD very shortly after they're done.
Or now that we have Netflix now, so I have the ability to just watch a whole season, and get it over with, you know. So
do you know this Common Grounds comic that Gene Paul's Peter knows a lot?
Yeah, I don't know that one.
A lot of stuff I'm not familiar with.
And that's pretty powerful. And that's exactly the idea that I'm talking about. That book spoke to me. Would have sworn he wrote it for me.
Right.
Those are the kind of things that I'm craving, that somebody's going to have something to say that that's going to be a little more powerful. Nothing wrong with serials, nothing wrong with superheroes at all. It's not even about that. It's just that craving for something that's going to speak to you a little more, which again, to kind of bring it back to the First Kingdom, it's the hope that there's going to be some interesting ideas there presented that's going to just kind of change my way of thinking about a subject, even if it is minor, would be great.
Yeah. Well, and with the thing about liking artists, because I definitely do, with the long form comics, like say the Hickman comics, there's an army of artists working on those.
Yeah.
So you're constantly shifting artists, and it's like when I was a kid and reading comics, or even looking back at them, it's disturbing when the artist changes to me, but at least the last story was done. I don't have to have the art change in the middle of a long story. For some reason, I'm thinking of Captain America, which I used to love as a kid, with Sal Buscema art, and then suddenly it would be Frank Robbins. Do you remember that artist?
No, I don't. No, I don't have much history with Captain America.
So un-Marvel-like.
Oh, really? Hey.
He came from comic strips, newspaper comic strips, I think.
Okay.
And his art just seemed terrible in the context of Buscema kind of artwork or Kirby kind of artwork. And I just remember it was almost impossible to read those issues. But with both Marvel and DC, I'll get very distracted when, you're reading a 12-part story and there's 3 different artists doing it.
Yeah, because the A artist couldn't keep up and they needed somebody to help out. And there's been some times where it does work because the story is kind of catered to that,
That's
to some
true.
degree.
That's true. If they
it can be very off-putting is what I meant to say, when it just shifts all of a sudden.
And so that's kind of a nice thing. Image comics usually have consistent art style from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And the art is literally part of the story in comics. I mean, that's why we like it. So it's like changing the voice of the story in the middle of the story. The First Kingdom would be horrible with the wrong art. It's the art unified with his crazy ideas that makes it work. Well,
absolutely. I mean, and that's proof of it right there. Just seeing that one cover is like,
we go
what the hell is that? What the hell are you doing?
Gonna go bad because of the bad art.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just from a cover. We should quickly say good morning to Larasa. She said she woke up and saw that this was on. So good morning.
Have a good breakfast coffee.
Some Baileys to start your day in there.
Well, how are you doing, Terrence? It's much later your time than mine. That reminds me.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I'm usually up late anyways. Holy crap, it is 11:45. I didn't actually realize that. We'll kind of shut her down in a little bit, but I'm not dying by any stretch.
Are you I saw you twittering that you were getting safety courses and stuff. Are you about to start up another job, and will you be busy
it's all for the same industry, but there's a lot of changes that are happening in Winnipeg as far as safety concerns on the film sets and older generation people that are working currently in film who still are kind of a little bit of the mindset that it's we're a special industry and we do things differently. And it's like, well, we may be, but we still have to do things that are safer. And there's a little bit more push from some of us that we need to kind of take things a little more serious. So there was something offered and that I went to yesterday, and there's going to be more coming up that I want to just check out as far as the parameters and what the laws are and where we can hold producers more accountable for taking better care of us and watching out for our safety. So it was actually really interesting little talk. They were really nice guys. So.
Yeah, because I feel like we see a lot of videos from you. I know that means you're between jobs, and then
that's right.
Here for a while, you're off on a movie set or something.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, no, this is a huge downtime, and I had the minor hernia surgery a few weeks ago now, so that's kind of taken me out of commission. So I can't kind of fully go back to work. It's by no means any issue. I feel great, but I can't go back to full-time carrying 300-pound dollies up and down stairs at this stage anyway. I need another, but it's come at the great time because winter is always our dead time around Christmas. It'll pick up again in February, so I'll be ready by then.
So every year you can rebuild your body during the winter with the help of medical science, and then go back out and destroy it
or let it go to absolute shit by sitting around and eating a bunch of garbage. Yeah, especially through Christmas. It's hard,
Yeah. Well, as you get older, you got to exercise more just to keep all the joints and stuff working.
Yeah. Well, and that's the good thing.
You're not quite at my stage yet. But.
No, it's a good thing of having such a young daughter. I mean, we were out today. There's been times I'll just take her for a walk. We live kind of downtown, sort of, and we'll just go for a walk to the mall. And it's been such beautiful weather. Just getting out with her for an hour or two just to walk around and burn off her energy helps me, at least keeps me moving, you know, instead of reading comics and on the couch all day. So
right.
yeah.
Anyway, sorry for that. I don't know
That's
what made
fine.
me
Yeah,
think
yeah,
of
no,
that.
no.
But I've really enjoyed that you haven't been working, because we've got a lot of great videos from.
Well, it's nice to have a break for sure. That's the good thing. Yeah, and I mean, it's true though. Like when I do have a break, I don't know. I love doing the videos and I love talking to everybody. So it's always something that draws me back. It's never even a question of, do I need a hiatus, or am I, you know, every once in a while I second guess it, but that lasts for half a day and then I'm completely fine, because ultimately I just like talking about all this stuff. So
Right. Until I start spreading lies about you on the internet. And
yeah, it's true. Yeah. Oh, I don't understand it, but what are you going to do? Jean-Paul Ace Peters from Newfoundland, which I do remember saying in one of his videos, I think when he was talking about the shipping, he had the good shipping video.
There must not be, are there comic book shops in Newfoundland? I think of it as a not very populated area, but maybe I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, I've never
been there.
I've never been out there. I would love to visit.
But he must have been reading comics longer than his age looks to be, because, or maybe he's just researched older comics a lot, because he's very knowledgeable.
Yeah, Uber fan. Yeah. So anything else you wanted to kind of mention as we kind of wrap it up here? Because we probably should.
Yeah, I'm kind of out of interesting things to say, I suppose.
It was a good chat, though. I'm glad we got a chance to do it. I'm glad both of our schedules worked out.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else gets anything out of us discussing the First Kingdom, but it's certainly fun to have someone else to talk about it with.
For sure, yeah.
So I'd love to chat with you again after another 5 issues or so.
Yeah, for sure. I'll make a trip to the library and see what they have there. Because the main one that we have downtown, years ago, I used to take Mr. Tom there, and they had a really good graphic novel section. So in the back of my head, I have high hopes that they will have something like that, because it was very impressive, the amount of books they had.
Can you search their catalog online and then put things on hold?
Yeah, you can do that, and that's something.
That's what I have to do with graphic novels. The good ones are always picked off the shelves, and so I have to put things on hold to get them.
Although something like the First Kingdom, if they do have, I imagine it's probably one of those that's sitting there just waiting patiently for somebody.
Mine on hold. I mean, I got it within a few days, but it was not on the shelf. For
sure, yeah.
I was surprised to see they had all 6 of them.
Portland, though, may have a different idea of readability than some of the downtown folks in Winnipeg. It's
right. So yeah, I'm only talking because I know some people say, "Oh, I go to the library and there's nothing any good there," but
yeah,
I get all this good stuff, but it's because I use computers and
that's right. Yeah.
But it may be totally different in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Seems like you have a lot of good shops. What's the size of Winnipeg?
We're kind of 600, 700,000. It's a fair size. Yeah, it's a fair size city.
It's not that much different from Portland then.
Yeah, no.
I think we're about 700,000, then maybe twice that much when you have all the suburbs. But
yeah, no, I love it. It's a great size. It's a perfect size for me. I lived in Ontario and commuted to Toronto and for a year for school and things, and that was too. I mean, as much as I love Toronto because I saw some great musicians, found some great shops and all sorts of things, just that size of a city was a little too much for me. I think Winnipeg is the perfect size, and we're just lucky. Like the comic shops that I go to now, I mean, the Red River bookshop that I've gone to a few times in the past month or two. I mean, like I've said before, I remember that guy from when I was a kid, and he's still around. The book fair that's downtown, I remember the one lady that still works there and owns it. I remember her from when I was a kid. Like we have a couple of these staples that I'm lucky enough that they've stuck around, you know.
So you grew up in Winnipeg, and I probably shouldn't do this on the air, and then moved away and then came back.
We'll say goodbye, and then we can have a quick chat. Okay. Yeah, for sure. All right, thanks
to
everybody
LaRasa and Jean-Paul Ace Peter and 64-page special and the Little Monsters movie podcast for all watchers.
Yes. Thank you very much, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you all soon. I'm hitting the button.